Welcome to the What's Your Truth podcast, the show that not only showcases the best of independent artists, but also explores what inspires them, what drives them, and what they consider their fundamental purpose as an artist to be. Today on the show, we have Kevin Riley Corbo. Now, I've actually been following Kevin's music career for quite a few years, and I can honestly say I've never personally seen a musician grow and mature as rapidly and expansively as Kevin. Originally from Los Angeles, Kevin is a live and session player in Nashville, Tennessee. He has studied at the prestigious Berklee College of Music, and he's also studied under virtuoso bassist Victor Wooten. Excelling in all styles bass, including funk, soul, jazz, and of course some good old-fashioned ass-kicking rock bass. Along with session playing, Kevin is in the Hippies and Cowboys band out of Nashville, with whom he plays over 250 shows per year. For anyone that doesn't know, that is a shitload of shows to play in one year.
Indeed, yeah.
He's young, he's full of spunk, and he embodies everything that's awesome about being a musician. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Riley Corbo.
Hello, yeah. Good to be here. As a matter of fact, I'm actually in Los Angeles, ironically enough, rather than Nashville. I'm just visiting family for the week, but yeah, Nashville is a heck of a place. I'll tell you that much, and it's definitely been treating me well and keeping me quite busy as a musician. So, yeah,
That's great. Well, let's get into it, shall we?
absolutely.
Awesome. So my first question is, how did you decide you wanted to become a musician?
I think that happened oddly enough, about 11 years ago. I had always been around music. My dad played music and had always been in bands growing up, and even had his own studio at one point. And I think it was sort of a natural, just a few different instruments that I picked up from time to time before I really eventually settled on bass. And by the time I had picked up the bass, I had enough of a grounding with guitar and with drums and other instruments that when I got that, and when I ended up, getting a bass for my 14th birthday, as a matter of fact, um, I had gotten the skill level up to the point where I was able to go and play shows. And so it basically happened that way where, like, I'd picked up the instrument for maybe like 1 or 2 weeks and practiced a lot, and got to a point where I was comfortable being on stage around that point, and it just sort of took off from there. I mean, it started off like with open mics and different smaller clubs, and then eventually when I ended up moving to Nashville, it was a very quick transition to larger venues, bigger gigs, playing with already established artists, and just doing it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you just went out there and just, just blazed, man. Just fucking tore right into it.
Yeah. I mean, the odd thing is that, like, the whole move to Nashville, it wasn't so much like I didn't necessarily have the connections out there to just start right away. A lot of it happened honestly by, I would say, partially coincidence.
Hmm.
Like, artists just happening to need a rhythm section that I would just run into through just networking, either through, like, honestly, the very first show that I ever played out there, believe it or not, actually happened because my mom uh, let somebody know, oh, I have a son, he plays an instrument, and it was just sort of like, yeah, whatever. And then it took a couple more times before they actually met up with me with instruments in hand, and by that time it was just kind of like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
By the way, for everyone out there, how old are you?
I'm 26 currently, just turned 26.
So and at 14 was when you really started to get to the point where you were playing shows. So you've already been playing shows for over 10 years.
Yeah, just about. I mean, on a professional level, I would say about 6 years, and professional to the point where I was really taking care of myself and keeping a roof over my head, I would say about 2.5,
Wow.
bordering on going on 2.5 now.
Amazing. So you make your complete living as an artist.
Yeah. It's kind
Man.
of wild to think sometimes, but yeah,
Yeah, no, but let that be a lesson. It can be done. It can definitely be
absolutely,
done.
absolutely, yeah.
So what was the first experience you remember having with music, like at all?
Well, I mean, well, I'll tell you two things because first experience would be like, when I was very young and my dad would have a guitar and I would be around it and I would, you know, pluck a couple of strings or whatnot. But I would say the first experience where I really had somewhat of a click of, oh, wait, I can do this was when I was in school and there was a rock band that they had. Believe it or not, it wasn't a jazz band, it wasn't a classical band or anything like that, but they actually had a rock class. And I went in at one point, and I was just kind of new to the school and didn't really know a whole lot of people, and so ended up picking up the bass and was just jamming along, having fun with some of the other students, and the other students clearly knew what they were doing, like way beyond what I knew at the time. I mean, I was just plucking a couple of notes, but at that point, I just sort of dropped any any idea of like, oh, I'm gonna do this and it's gonna sound good, and I was just kind of like, what, I'm just gonna play along with what they're doing, and that ended up putting me in a position where like I was jamming and I was having a good time and I was doing my best to keep the rhythm, at that point,
Yeah.
and it ended up sounding really good, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is fun. I can definitely make some new friends with this. you know
Oh yeah. Was that Caleb's class?
Indeed it was. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember Caleb Healy, another great musician, actually.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Right on. So, who are the biggest influences on your work and why?
Well, you touched on it earlier. I studied under Victor Wooten, and
Mhm.
he is an influence in so many different ways. I mean, that guy is just something else in terms of not just how he is as a musician, but how he is as a human being. And that is, I think, the foremost thing that he really wants to teach is not how to make people great musicians, but how to make better people in
Wow.
general. Yeah, it has a lot to do with like just expanding upon people's character and just learning more about themselves through his classes, and that in itself, being a better person, does tend to make for being a better musician. I know there's a lot of stories and a lot of biographies out there that might claim the opposite, but truthfully, I mean, we just lost Jeff Beck a couple of days ago, and Jeff Beck was as good as he was a guitar player. From what I understand from the people that I know who knew him, unfortunately, I never got a chance to meet him personally, but through them, the stories that they tell, he was, I would say, on par equally, if not a better human being than he was a guitar player, if that's even possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say he was a great influence on me just personally in terms of how I act and behave as an individual, in addition to my playing and my playing style. Beyond that, I would say Paul McCartney. All of the rock greats. Um, a lot of funk bass players, Bootsy Collins,
Yes.
John Entwistle. Yeah, yeah, those guys definitely influenced my playing a great deal. And you know what? Actually, I should plug a local musician out here in Los Angeles by the name
Please.
of Cherie Connor.
Oh yeah, I know
She,
Shuri.
yes, yeah, Cherie, wonderful, wonderful person. She really inspired me as a bass player and also as a singer.
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
like the whole thing that she did. I mean, I could never figure out playing bass and singing, and I would pick her brain as much as I could, and she was just, well, you just got to practice. You just got to practice it, And eventually, I was just like, sat down, made it happen, and that's honestly one of the biggest things that has helped my overall musicianship has been singing and playing at the same time. You know,
Wow. And I mean,
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense too. That really pushes the envelope of your capabilities, and
yeah.
yeah, I could just see how that could definitely be a very expansive thing to get good at.
It's a very good advertising point too. I mean,
Yeah,
there's plenty of work for bassists, and even more work for bassists who can sing and can sing lead or harmony, anything like that.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what's the weirdest thing that's ever inspired you?
Weirdest thing that's ever inspired me. Well, hmm, it's a good question. It's an interesting question. I mean, you know, I would say studying under Victor, and more particularly the Wooten brothers in general. One thing about them is that they all have their own distinct philosophies on life. Um, and they're all very much, I mean, I guess for like the layman, they're kind of off kilter, a little off color. They're like, well, wait a minute, what's happening over here? But the thing is, the way that they think and the way that they behave and the way that they act is so different in regards to how they've built their philosophies. That well, just to give you an example, uh, Joseph. Joseph Wooten, who happens to be a keyboard player, he happens to work with the Steve Miller Band. As a matter of fact,
Right on.
he's been the keyboard player for Steve Miller for about I want to say 25 years. It might even be more than that. He is very much into numerology,
Hmm.
very into like numbers and repeating numbers, and like whenever he sees stuff like that, he has a very good grasp of, I suppose, in from his viewpoint, what that means. And learning from him, I was able to kind of spot those things in my own life, even if I have like a little bit of a skeptical kind of like, well, maybe not. Even if I have that viewpoint, being open to that and learning from that, I'm able to take in a little bit of the information that he gave, and that he has in his philosophy to, I guess, improve my own.
Wow.
Yeah. So I would say, like, I mean, there's like the quirkier stuff. Um, the simplest answer I could give would be nature, learning from nature, um, and how it works, how it's put together, all of that. In addition to that, astronomy is something that I happen to uh, take well. In any case, yeah.
Right on. Awesome. And how has your art influenced other people?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. There was a situation where I was playing a show, and it was at Johnny Cash's Bar and Grill in Nashville. And there was this woman with her husband who was sitting and listening to our stuff. We ended up packing out the house. It was a great show. And we were just setting down, and things were kind of calming down. The crowd was dispersing. And I go down to use the restroom because the restroom's on the on in the basement. So I'm
Hmm.
walking down the steps, and I see this woman talking to our lead singer. And I stop in just to, like, say, hey, thanks for enjoying the show, yada yada yada. And she's telling both of us about how her husband, like, their marriage was really not going well. They were having a lot of issues. He was miserable, and they took this trip out to Nashville to kind of escape for a little while. And she said, your show, that was the first time that I've seen my husband smile in years.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was a big thing for both of us.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. That's incredible. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the whole point, right? That's the whole point of what we do, isn't it?
exactly. Helping people escape from whatever muck they're in for at least a little while, bringing them up.
Yeah, 100%. Wow.
And
That's beautiful, man.
yeah, entertaining. It's a
Yeah.
powerful thing.
Yes, it really is. So, do you have any pre-show or pre-studio rituals?
Um, well, I mean, yes and no. If I'm doing work on Broadway, or if I'm doing something where I don't really have to set up as much equipment, I won't necessarily have a whole ritual. But for the most part, just having my instrument in my hand, just getting comfortable with it, warming up, um, doing a lot of different exercises rather than like playing over songs that I know. I'll usually just do like different hand dexterity exercises that one of my teachers showed me. And actually, I should plug him too, Anthony Wellington.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, he teaches. He has a studio, and as a matter of fact, his own distinct curriculum called Bassology.
Oh, cool.
Wonderful, wonderful
I've heard
guy.
of it actually. I've heard of
Yeah,
bass.
yeah, yeah. Anthony is, in short, a genius. He's
Hell
an
yeah.
absolute genius. So I do a lot of his exercises just to warm up and get comfortable. Um, Beyond that, I mean, if I'm just like trying to loosen up and have a good time, I might like, have a drink with some of the bandmates and just, you know, have at it.
Right on.
Yeah.
And then what risks, if any, have you personally taken for the sake of your music?
Whew. Wow. Well, I would say time. Um, Financially speaking, I probably could have ended up getting like a day job and working my way up from there and like, making a comfortable living. Um, it was the exact opposite where I'm not making any money for a good while. And I would say that and beyond that, there's a lot of relationships that maybe could have panned out in a different way had it not been for my desire and drive to make it as a musician. There's a lot of personal sacrifices that you'll have to make along the way in one way or one form or another that really it's a very individual thing. Everybody's going to have their own journey and everybody's going to have their own sacrifices that they're going to have to make. I mean, for me, um I would say financially and socially for a little bit, and then when it got to the point where I was making money, obviously all of that stuff sort of went away. But yeah, I mean, you're working weird hours and you're up at weird times and you go to sleep at weird times and you wake up at weird times. It's not exactly the type of thing where you can like go to a coffee shop and meet someone nice or something like that. I mean, a lot of the people who are there's a saying, nothing good happens after 2 a.m. You
That's
know,
fair. That's fair.
yeah, yeah. And I end off at 2:30. That's
Oh,
usually when the shows end is around 2:30. So it's just kind of like, all right. Yeah.
wow, that's a late night.
Yeah, yeah. And in a lot of circumstances, you have to keep your distance from certain individuals around that time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
unless you want to get yourself in trouble or something. Yeah,
correct. I'm
yeah.
familiar with this. So, what's the craziest risk you've ever seen another artist take for their craft?
Wow. Oof. Mm. I mean, I've been through so much. I've seen so much from other artists that I'm kind of like, oof. Um, I had a guy that I knew, didn't get all that close to, but he was somebody that I would spend time with, and he was a huge fan of Jim Morrison.
Hmm.
Huge fan of Jim Morrison to the point where he wanted to like be the next Jim Morrison.
Oh no.
And yeah, yeah. I mean, quite honestly, I would say that for anyone listening, you'd have to look up kind of what kind of an individual Jim Morrison was. I mean, I will say, in short, he was definitely legendary and did a lot of great things as a musician and as a performer. But I mean, if you idolize these individuals to the point where you're trying to be the next them,
Yeah.
that is not a healthy thing because a lot of them, they're not the greatest human beings in the world, unfortunately. And he definitely took after Jim in such a way that it was like not healthy.
Right
So
on.
that was a very stupid risk on his part, I would say.
Fair
Yeah.
point. Yeah, and I mean also too, I mean, just to expound on what you said too, it's also like art is about individually expressing your own creative messaging communication, I
Mm.
think. So it's like being influenced by someone is one thing, but trying to like be a replica of them just kind of almost seems like it defeats the purpose of art in general, because then it's not your communication anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
To a degree anyway. And
there's a point where, like, definitely, I think the best term is duplicating, not
okay.
replicating or trying to be the other person, but just duplicating, just being able to copy exactly what they did, but doing it in a new unit of time as you know. Because I mean, as much as I want to sound like Prince, or as much as I want to sound like Jeff Beck, and as much as I can emulate the techniques that they used on the guitar, I am not going to, in a new unit of time, play what they would have played in
Right.
that same circumstance. It's just not possible.
Right.
Two things can't exist in the same place at the same time. So anytime I play like a cover of another person's tune, as much as I want to try and duplicate the dynamics that they used, the volume that they used, the tone that they used, the equipment that they used, you, as far as you can get in that sense, them being in that same situation. If I'm playing like a Beatles tune, and I'm like playing it on a Hofner bass, and I'm using like the same kind of pick that McCartney used, and using the same tone settings that he used, even if I'm playing the exact bass line that I heard on the recording, Paul might not even do that if he were in that same room playing on all of that same equipment.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. I like how you differentiate between replication versus duplication. That's actually a really, really good, really fine point to make. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that replication, or I would think that duplication is a very important thing for an artist who's just trying to build skill to like be able to play like the people or the songs that the people that they idolize played. That's a
Hmm.
very, very, very good thing. And it really helps with skill beyond, I think, anything else that you could do. And but sort of recognizing and being able to take yourself out of, like, okay, I'm not trying to be Prince, I'm just trying to play Purple Rain.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, again, it's a fantastic differentiation to make. What an insight. And again, ladies and gentlemen, 26 years old. But he's been there, man. He's living it.
Yep,
Uh,
indeed I have.
so
Yeah.
what's one thing about you that would shock everyone to know?
Phew, I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely very much dedicated to music. That is the, I guess, going back on your point of, like, what risks have you taken? Like, my whole life is, rehearsals and uh you know um gigs and shows and recording sessions and all of that. Like, that's everything that I am, very much is musically related in some way or another. I do happen to be very religious. I suppose a lot of people are taken aback by that. um
Okay.
yeah, yeah, that would be it, I suppose.
Okay, right on. And then what's the one thing or the one tool that you absolutely cannot live without as an artist, and why?
Hmm. um Not exactly a tool, but a team. Good people around you, good people that you have in your life that you trust, and you all are on the same wavelength, and you're able to make sacrifices for them, and able to make sacrifices for you. A good team is invaluable. I would also say time.
Yes.
Yeah, time management, and the skill of time management, specifically when it comes to learning and improving upon skills. Yeah, practice time, time in the studio, time with the band, invaluable.
Hell yeah. And I'm glad you said what you did about people and having the right group of people around you, because I think, and I feel like you might have touched on this a little bit earlier, but surrounding yourself with a good network of people that are like-minded and that are communal with you and are helping you, and there's a give and take, it'll make or break a career. And if you, on the other hand, don't have that, and you have people that don't understand it or don't support you, and there's not a mutual respect and a mutual artistic flow, it can be crushing. And there are a
Indeed,
lot of people that would never be artists if they had that as opposed to the support network. So that was a really great point to make.
indeed, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, just knowing who to trust is a very, very good skill in that regard. You know.
Yes. And unfortunately, to some degree or another, I feel like we've all had those experiences with people that we trusted that we maybe shouldn't have. Even a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bit, it happens. So what has been the most difficult piece of music for you to create and why?
Huh. Well, I would say I am working on a solo record.
Oh, cool.
It's been very slow going. I've got some good material in that regard. But when it comes to just certain skills that I haven't necessarily perfected, or that I usually delegate a lot of the skills that I'm not good at. One of those happens to be, for the most part, songwriting in
Hmm.
terms of lyrics and putting a melody together. And maybe that's just because I'm super picky in that regard, or whether it's just a lack of know-how in certain aspects. But most of the time, I will delegate that kind of stuff to the people who are on my team, who are in my band, who are that I trust with it. I just kind of give it to them and let them do what they want with it.
Yeah.
And if I'm happy with it, then I'll be like, okay, yeah. And if I'm not, then I'll be like, no, let's change this, this, and this, and then there you go. Yeah, putting together the solo record for me has definitely been quite a challenge. But it's going. I've got a couple of tunes under my belt now, and just need to get a few more ready, and then record them all, and there you go.
That's so great. When are you looking to release that, by the way? When is that?
Oh, indefinitely, quite honestly. I don't have any idea of a release date yet, but I would say within the next few years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. That's cool. And if you were going to write a book about your career up to this point, what would you title it?
I don't know. Some things you might not believe happened.
Okay. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
That resonates.
Yeah.
And what are your plans for world domination?
Well, we've got some great shows coming up. Um, we have a manager. I'm talking about Hippies and Cowboys
Yeah.
specifically. We have a manager that we've been looking into. Um, we have a significant amount of releases that we have planned for this year. A great amount of at least, by rough estimate, I would say about like 7 or 8 total releases, and that's not individual tracks. Some
Yeah.
of those are individual singles, some of them are EPs, and I believe at one point later in the year there might be an album. But
Wow.
yeah, all of that is just building up on everything that we've had. I mean, it's not exactly I'm not expecting us to release something and then it to immediately blow up and we're suddenly this.
Yeah. Right.
Um, could happen.
Sure.
It won't happen unless we release something. But
Correct.
the current plan so far is just chipping away, keeping at what we've been doing so far, playing playing gigs, playing more high profile gigs,
Hmm.
and yeah, releasing music along the way.
Amazing. And then my last question, and just to kind of revisit my intro a little bit. So again, this show is, it's not just about showcasing artists, but it's also about exploring what inspires them, what drives them, what they consider their fundamental purpose as an artist to be. So Kevin, what's your truth?
My fundamental purpose, I would say, I want to make people happy. I want to make them sing. I want to make them dance. I want to make them enjoy themselves. And the greater amount of people that I can make uh, that I can accomplish that with, the better.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. And that, man, it's been really the most fun thing in this show is like, for me, like, I feel like people look at music and musicians and they think of things like, sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all the things that go along with the image. But I tell you, most of the artists I talk to, what they do has more to do with helping other people than it does with any of that bullshit. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
and that's just so great to see, man. That makes me so happy to hear you say that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing. I mean, there's a reason why people do say that. There is that element to this industry, unfortunately, and in a lot of circumstances, like the reason why people get into that in the first place is not like to be the next rock star. It's for some other fundamental reason that they are perhaps lacking in their own life in some way, shape, or form. Um, but yeah, I mean, the best people to ever really do it. I mean, temperance is key. Being able to say no is key, and
Yes.
yeah. And aside from that, having a good time
Yes.
does not mean any of that stuff. But having a good time, you know.
Yeah, like being there in the moment and just enjoying the art for the art because it's fucking great if you can actually manage to just be in the moment with it.
You know, this isn't one of my good friends. Very talented artist in his own right. Owns a couple of clubs, and one thing that he would always say is there's two things. Like if you've got the skill, if you've got the people, if you've got all of that, there's only two things that can really mess up your career if it's on the right track. And the first thing would be drugs, and the second would be like relationships.
Yeah.
You know, that's definitely two things that if you get poorly involved with either one of those things, it can really hurt you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show, man. It's been awesome. It's been great catching up too. Like I said,
Yeah.
we haven't talked in so long. So it's been really cool. So before we end off, though, I did want to take 60 seconds and just anything you want to plug that's coming up. 60 seconds of Kevin Riley Corbo. Go.
Yeah. Well, we have a EP that's on the way. It's titled "Moving On." The title track itself, wonderful, wonderful song. One of my personal favorites out of our entire catalog of unreleased material and released material for that matter. So moving on, that's coming out. You can find the link to it on my Instagram bio, as well as the band's Instagram bio. If you go on there and you click the link right there, you can pre-save it. Pre-saving helps a ton. It helps us get on bigger playlists. It just helps us across the board. It's probably the most helpful 2-3 clicks that you can do to help us achieve world domination.
Right on. There you go. And the links to the social media pages will be below in the description. So it'll be real easy for people to find that for you.
Indeed. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show, man. It's been an honor. And guys, until next show, I'm Johnnie Ferro. We'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, you follow your own rules and you preach them on to me. But you don't think before you act, and you ain't got no business with me. You know, no. But then what's your truth? Oh, what's your truth?